How to identify a font. When browsing through inspiration, you might be struck by an amazing combination of fonts that blows your socks off. A grey that works so well on a thin sans serif font you'd die for. How do you borrow them for your own work? Well, you probably know about this function most browsers have, but I'll run you through it just in case you might have skipped that lesson. First, open up an amazing looking website. I'll take a look at designnova.net, which is stunning in my book. So let's start off with the headline. I'm using Firefox because I don't trust Google Chrome's privacy, but that's another subject, and I'll right-click on the text and hit Inspect Element. This will bring up this panel underneath. We can then select the Fonts tab, and there you go. You have all the information here. We can then go down underneath the hero area and use the same principle. Montserrat is the font of choice, and it looks amazing. The thing is, not everything about the font is shown here. To get the full picture, we're going to go to Rules. Scroll down a bit, and now we're getting the complete picture. If you don't know CSS, don't panic, this isn't anything crazy, it's actually quite simple. Font size is 16 pixels, but we had that already. Line height is 28, and that's really important. In Photoshop, that's called leading, as I may have mentioned earlier, and it's controlled from here. This sets the distances between lines, and as you see, if I change it to a lower value, the design loses quite a lot of style points. This is why you should always stay away from the auto setting in Photoshop. Moving on, we get to see the font family and font weight. Here, don't expect to see things like bold or thin, because we usually get a value like this, 300. But it's fairly easy to find that weight in Photoshop, so no worries there. Lastly, we have letter spacing set to 6 pixels. This makes the text breathe quite a lot, and it looks fantastic in this all uppercase format. Letter spacing translates into tracking in Photoshop, and converting one into the other isn't an easy thing to do because it relies on that EM measurement I mentioned earlier. Lastly, we'll want to see what colour was used here, but for that we're going to have to scroll up a bit. And as you can see, it's pure black. In some cases, you might see very particular codes for dark greys. The easiest ones are 333 or 555, but there are other ones that give a certain look. The differences are subtle, but they're there. Notice I didn't say 333333, which would be the complete code in the format Photoshop uses. I only said 333, and that's because when the hex code has the same digit all across, you can type in only the first 3 characters, and the right colour will show up. So that's how you use your browser to identify a font. I'd like to point out that in this particular website, we easily saw the font size value. It was 16 pixels. If that was 1.2 EM, we would have had to dig deeper in order to find out the actual value. So while EM is great for scaling fonts in order to adjust for different displays, or different zoom levels, it's not so great for people who are looking to inspect your design, and in this case, that's us. But say the font isn't selectable and thus the browser inspector doesn't yield any results. Or maybe it gives incomplete information. What should you do in that case? Well, there's this great community over at myfonts.com and they're amazing. Simply write into Google "what the font" and the first results will lead you there. On this website, you can load in your image with a font you want to identify. The image must be very clean and it shouldn't contain anything else other than the font. Ideally, all letters should be well spaced out and the image should contain very distinct letters so the software doesn't confuse them. After you press continue, the site will automatically try to match each letter. If it doesn't get it right, you should change the value underneath, and for the empty boxes you should fill them out because that means there are letters that weren't recognized. Finally, hit continue and you'll have a list of similar fonts. The accuracy varies depending on your image, but just in case you don't find the exact one, you can submit a case to their forum. You have to sign up first, but that's free. Then ask for help in a detailed fashion, and you'll be surprised at how fast people will jump in to try and help you. I've had 100% accurate responses in under an hour, but of course that varies quite a lot. They also have this specify image URL, but it's basically the same thing. You just skip a step by not saving the image because you get its link instead. That wraps it up. That's 3 ways in which you can identify a font. By doing so, you're heading in the right way of improving your typography game. The more you use fonts, the better you'll get at it.